Midnight at Riverbrook Farm. 5 shadowy figures moved through cornfields toward the isolated farmhouse. No lights inside. No signs of life. Remember, she's just some woman who doesn't know what's good for her, a gruff voice muttered. In and out. Scare her enough to sign. Glass shattered as the back door gave way. 2 men slipped inside, while others forced the front door with a crowbar. Upstairs first. Get the kid if you need to, the leader commanded, his voice a threatening growl. The first foot hit the bottom step when it happened. A soft click echoed through the darkness, the unmistakable sound of a rifle bolt sliding into place. 4 men inside. 1 outside by the oak tree. A woman's voice stated calmly from the shadows. Not frightened. Eerily detached. You've made a terrible miscalculation tonight. The leader spun around, gun raised. Where the hell are you? Show yourself. A red laser dot appeared on his chest, directly over his heart. I count 26 ways I could end this right now without any of you leaving my property alive. Before anyone could answer, there was a whistling sound followed by a dull thud. The lookout outside dropped to the ground, disabled by a shot they never heard fired. Jesus! One of the men gasped, stumbling backward. The laser tracked to the next intruder as the woman spoke again. You picked the wrong farm tonight. The wrong mother. The wrong veteran. A pause. Your move. Hey family. Welcome back to another powerful story of justice and empowerment. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments right now while I get into this incredible true story of courage and consequence. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community dedicated to sharing stories that need to be told. Now, let me tell you about a woman who reminds us why you should never judge a book by its cover. 12 hours earlier. The morning sun painted golden streaks across acres of corn and soybean fields as Ella Blackwood stood on her porch, steam rising from her coffee mug. At 38, her face carried the quiet strength of someone who had seen more than most. Her dark skin glowed in the early light, and though her shoulders remained squared with military precision, her eyes had softened since returning to civilian life. Phoenix. Breakfast in 5 minutes, she called toward the upstairs window where her 12-year-old daughter was undoubtedly buried in another book. Riverbrook Farm had been in Ella's family for 3 generations. Her grandfather had purchased these 100 acres when black ownership of farmland was still a revolutionary act. She'd grown up running through these fields, climbing the ancient oak tree that stood sentinel at the edge of the property, and learning the rhythms of rural life from her father. But the farm was never meant to be hers. Not really. As the youngest of 4 and the only girl, Ella had been expected to pursue other paths. And she had, just not the ones her parents anticipated. The screen door creaked as Phoenix emerged, her curly hair pulled into a messy bun, tablet tucked under her arm. Morning, Mom. She yawned, accepting the plate of scrambled eggs and toast. Are we still going to the farmer's market today? Ella nodded, taking her place at the worn oak table that had witnessed 5 decades of Blackwood family meals. We need to sell as much of that sweet corn as possible before it goes past its prime. Phoenix poked at her eggs. Sylvia texted me yesterday. Said her dad told her we should just sell this place since we can't handle it. Ella's jaw tightened momentarily before relaxing into a practiced smile. And what did you tell her? That my mom doesn't give up that easily. Phoenix grinned, revealing a gap where a baby tooth had recently departed. And that we Blackwoods don't run when things get hard. Pride swelled in Ella's chest. Her daughter had her grandmother's wisdom and her own stubbornness. A powerful combination. That's my girl. After breakfast, Ella stood before the bathroom mirror, methodically twisting her locks into a tight bun. Her reflection revealed the small scar along her jawline, a souvenir from her second tour. 15 years of military service had left other marks too, most of them invisible. Master Sergeant Ella Blackwood, one of the first women to qualify for the U.S. Army Special Forces after combat roles opened to females. An exceptional markswoman who had become one of the most respected snipers in her unit. 3 tours of duty, multiple commendations, and now, a struggling single mother trying to resurrect her family farm. The transition hadn't been easy. When her father died unexpectedly 3 years ago, Ella had made the decision to retire from active duty and return home. Her brothers had long since moved away, one a doctor in Atlanta, one an attorney in Chicago, and the eldest a professor in California. None had any interest in taking over the farm. It's not practical, they'd said. Sell it and split the money. But Ella couldn't do it. This land represented something more than acreage and assets. It was legacy, perseverance, proof that the impossible could be achieved with enough determination. So she'd moved back with 10-year-old Phoenix, using her military pension and savings to keep the operation running. The first year had been disastrous, equipment breakdowns, drought, and her own steep learning curve. The second year showed improvement. This third season was make or break. "Mom, have you seen my blue sneakers?" Phoenix called from upstairs. "Check under your bed." Ella replied, the familiar domestic exchange anchoring her to this peaceful present, so different from her former life. An hour later, they were loading the pickup truck with crates of corn, tomatoes, peppers, and homemade preserves. Riverbrook Farm might be smaller than the surrounding operations, but what they lacked in volume, they made up for in quality and diversity. "Morning, Blackwoods," a cheerful voice called from the neighboring property line. Conrad Winters, a Vietnam veteran in his 70s, approached with his characteristic limp and unwavering smile. He was among the few neighbors who had welcomed Ella back without reservation. "Morning, Mr. Winters," Phoenix replied, offering him one of the season's first apples. "Heading to market?" he asked, accepting the fruit with a nod of thanks. Ella nodded, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Need to move this produce while it's fresh." Conrad's expression shifted slightly, a shadow crossing his weathered face. "Heard anything from those fellows that were asking around about buying properties? The ones from Ridge Capital?" Ella shook her head. "They left a message last week. I didn't call back." Conrad took a bite of the apple, chewing thoughtfully. "Been pretty persistent with the Hendersons and the Crawfords, offering cash deals, above market value." "Not interested," Ella said firmly. "This land stays in the family." The old veteran nodded approvingly. "Had a feeling you'd say that." "Just keep your eyes open, Ella. Something doesn't sit right about those guys." "Always do," she replied with a knowing look between former soldiers. As Conrad shuffled back toward his property, Phoenix loaded the last crate. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Ella forced a smile. "Everything's fine, baby. Just business talk." But as they drove toward the farmer's market in the nearby town of Coopersville, Ella's mind raced. Conrad wasn't one for baseless concerns. If he was worried, there was reason to be. The market buzzed with Saturday morning activity. Their stall was situated between the Wilkins family's honey stand and a local baker selling sourdough bread. Small-town life had its challenges, especially for a black female veteran in a predominantly white farming community. But the market had become neutral ground of sorts. "Well, if it isn't Sergeant Blackwood and the little lieutenant," called Hank Wilkins as they set up their display. "Got any of those jalapenos this week?" "Fresh picked yesterday," Ella confirmed, handing Phoenix the pricing signs. "How are the bees doing?" "Productive as ever. Can't complain." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Heard you turned down Ridge Capital." News traveled fast in small communities. "Farm's not for sale." Hank nodded. "Smart. Between us, I don't think they're on the level. Too much cash, too few questions." Before Ella could respond, the market manager rang the opening bell, and customers began filtering through the aisles. For the next few hours, Ella lost herself in the rhythm of commerce, weighing produce, making change, answering questions about organic practices. Phoenix handled the electronic payments, her mathematical mind quickly calculating totals. Around midday, Ella noticed 3 men in crisp button-down shirts walking methodically from stall to stall. They looked out of place among the farmers and locals in weekend casual attire. Something about their movement pattern triggered the situational awareness that had kept her alive in combat zones. "Phoenix, can you handle things for a few minutes? I need to help Mrs. Davis with those heavy watermelons." Her daughter nodded, engrossed in a conversation with a classmate who had stopped by. Ella moved casually toward the elderly woman's stall, positioning herself to keep both Phoenix and the 3 men in her peripheral vision. The tallest of the men, broad-shouldered with close-cropped hair, separated from his companions, and approached the Blackwood farm stand. Ella observed as he engaged Phoenix in conversation, pointing to various produce items before glancing around with too much interest in their setup. When he handed her daughter a business card, Ella was already moving back toward her stall. "Can I help you?" she asked, stepping between the man and Phoenix with practiced casualness. He turned, extending his hand. "Byron Mercer, Ridge Capital Investments. Your daughter tells me you're the owner of Riverbrook Farm." Ella noted the firm handshake, the manicured nails, the expensive watch peeking from beneath his cuff. "I am. We've been trying to reach you, Miss Blackwood. I left several messages." "It's Sergeant Blackwood," she corrected mildly. "And I've been busy with harvest." Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance, perhaps, at being corrected by a woman he'd come to pressure. "Of course, Sergeant. I respect your service." The words sounded rehearsed. "I was hoping to set up a meeting to discuss an opportunity that could benefit you significantly." "I'm not interested in selling," Ella stated flatly. Mercer's professional smile didn't waver. "You haven't heard our offer." "Don't need to." His voice lowered, taking on a more intimate tone. "Sergeant Blackwood, I understand your attachment to your property, but farming is a difficult business even for those with experience. Our research shows Riverbrook Farm operating at a loss for 3 consecutive years." The accuracy of his information was unsettling. Ella maintained her neutral expression. "We're prepared to offer 50% above market value. Cash deal. No complications." He produced a folder from his leather portfolio. "These are difficult times for small farms, especially those run by individuals without generational farming experience." The subtle emphasis didn't escape her notice. Phoenix had gone quiet beside her, listening intently. "Thank you for your concern," Ella replied evenly. "But as I said, Riverbrook Farm isn't for sale, at any price." Mercer's pleasant demeanor slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder beneath. He slid the folder back into his portfolio with deliberate slowness. "Things happen to small operations like yours, Sergeant. Equipment failures, vandalism, access road issues. Each example delivered with casual precision. It would be a shame if your investment became untenable due to circumstances beyond your control." Phoenix stepped closer to her mother, sensing the tension. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Mercer?" Ella asked, her voice deadly quiet. His smile returned, professional and empty. "Not at all. Simply pointing out business realities." He placed his business card on their table. "When you reconsider, and you will, call this number. The offer has an expiration date." As he turned to leave, he added, "A single mother really should consider what's best for her child's future. This isn't a place for everyone." Ella watched him rejoin his companions, her face betraying nothing of the cold fury building inside her. To anyone observing, she appeared calm and collected as she returned to helping customers. But Phoenix knew better. "Mom," she whispered, "what did he mean about things happening?" Ella squeezed her daughter's shoulder reassuringly. "Nothing to worry about, baby. Just business talk." But as they packed up their remaining produce that afternoon, Ella's mind was already shifting into a mode she hadn't accessed in years, assessing threats, identifying vulnerabilities, formulating contingencies. The peaceful farmer was receding, and the Green Beret was reemerging. Some instincts never disappeared. They just went dormant until needed. And Ella Blackwood had always trusted her instincts. The evening after the farmer's market, Ella sat on the porch swing, her father's old shotgun across her lap. Not her weapon of choice, but its presence was comforting as the sun dipped below the horizon. Phoenix was inside finishing homework, blissfully absorbed in algebra equations rather than dwelling on the thinly veiled threats from earlier. Ella's phone screen glowed in the growing darkness as she studied the satellite view of Riverbrook Farm. 123 acres of mostly cultivated land, with the house and barn situated a quarter-mile from the main road. Too isolated in moments like this. Too exposed. The sound of tires on gravel pulled her attention from the screen. Headlights cut through the twilight as a sheriff's department cruiser rolled toward the house. Sheriff Clay Barton, 48 years old. Lifelong Coopersville resident. 3-term sheriff with a reputation for being fair but traditional. Evening, Sergeant Blackwood. he called, climbing out of his vehicle. His hand rested casually on his belt near his sidearm. A habit, not a threat. Sheriff, Ella acknowledged, remaining seated. What brings you out this way? Barton removed his hat, wiping his brow despite the evening cool. Heard there was a bit of a situation at the market today with those Ridge Capital folks. News traveled at light speed in Coopersville. Wasn't aware that business conversations warranted police attention, Ella replied evenly. The sheriff leaned against the porch railing. Hank Wilkins mentioned there might have been some implications made. Thought I'd check in. Ella measured her response carefully. They made an offer. I declined. They suggested reconsideration would be wise. That sounds like a threat, Sergeant. Sounded like one to me too. Barton sighed, replacing his hat. Look, I've known Byron Mercer since high school. His daddy was a councilman for 20 years. They're businessmen, not criminals. Businessmen don't typically imply that things might happen to someone's property, Ella countered. Ridge Capital has been buying up parcels all over the county. No issues with any of those transactions. The sheriff's tone held a note of dismissal. Sometimes folks hear what they expect to hear. The implication hung in the air between them. Ella kept her expression neutral. I'll file a report if that's what you want, Barton offered with minimal enthusiasm. But between us, sounds like typical negotiation tactics got misinterpreted. Ella stood slowly, the shotgun held purposefully non-threatening at her side. I've negotiated with warlords, Sheriff. I know the difference between bargaining and a threat. Barton's jaw tightened fractionally. With all due respect to your military service, Sergeant, this isn't a combat zone. It's Coopersville. We don't have gang problems or organized crime. We have property developers who sometimes push too hard for a deal. The dismissal stung, but it wasn't unexpected. Ella had encountered similar responses since returning to civilian life. Her expertise questioned, her perceptions dismissed as hypervigilance or PTSD, particularly when those perceptions didn't align with comfortable local narratives. I appreciate you stopping by, Sheriff, she said finally, the formality in her tone signaling the conversation was over. He nodded, retreating to his cruiser. Call the station if anything concrete happens. And Ella, he paused, his expression softening slightly. Maybe think about that offer. Single mom, struggling farm. No shame in taking a good deal when it comes along. As the sheriff's taillights disappeared down the drive, Ella reached for her phone again. This time she dialed a number she hadn't called in months. Riverbrook Farm, she said when a gruff voice answered. Tomorrow morning if you can. Conrad Winters arrived just after sunrise, his pickup truck loaded with fishing gear, a plausible cover for any early morning visitors. At 72, the Vietnam veteran moved more slowly than in his youth, but his eyes missed nothing as he surveyed the property. Phoenix at school already? He asked, accepting the mug of coffee Ella offered. Sent her to my cousin's in Eastbrook for a few days. School project they're working on together. The lie rolled easily off her tongue, protection as natural as breathing. They settled at the kitchen table, where Ella had spread out maps of the farm and surrounding properties. Ridge Capital has purchased 7 farms in the county in the last 8 months, she explained, marking each location. All smaller operations, all family-owned, all with financial pressures. Conrad studied the pattern. Creating a connected land mass, he observed. But for what? That's the question. Sheriff thinks I'm overreacting. The older veteran snorted. Barton wouldn't recognize a tactical situation if it sat in his lap and called him daddy. He took a slow sip of coffee. What's your instinct telling you? Ella pointed to the threatening business card she'd received. This isn't just aggressive business. The way Mercer looked at Phoenix. These men aren't just pushy. They're dangerous. You called anyone from the unit? She shook her head. Not yet. Wanted to be sure I wasn't. She trailed off. Seeing ghosts. Conrad finished. You survived 3 tours because you trusted your instincts, Ella. Don't start doubting them now because some small-town sheriff can't see past his high school football connections. Tears pricked unexpectedly at the corners of Ella's eyes. It had been months since anyone had validated her perceptions so unequivocally. I thought I was done fighting, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I came back here to grow things, not to. The words caught in her throat. Conrad reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers. Some of us don't get to put it all down, no matter how much we want to. The world doesn't let us. Phoenix deserves better than a mother who keeps seeing threats around every corner. Phoenix deserves a mother who keeps her safe, by any means necessary. Ella drew a deep breath, steadying herself. These men, whatever they're planning, it's bigger than just buying up farmland. There's something else. Agreed. Conrad nodded toward the maps. Show me what you're thinking. For the next hour, they analyzed the situation with military precision. The purchased properties, the timeline, the players involved. By the time they finished the second pot of coffee, a plan was beginning to form. I'll make some calls, Conrad said, rising to leave. Got a buddy at the county records office who owes me. And my grandson's good with computers, might be able to dig into Ridge Capital's background. At the door, he paused. Ella, if this escalates. I know, she replied quietly. I'll be ready. After Conrad left, Ella stood before the hallway closet, staring at the locked gun cabinet inside. With deliberate movements, she entered the combination and opened the heavy door. Beyond her father's hunting rifles lay a reinforced case with a biometric lock. Her pulse quickened as she pressed her thumb to the scanner. Inside, nestled in customized foam, lay the tools of her former profession. A disassembled sniper rifle, a Remington M24 with a specialized scope, a tactical sidearm, night vision equipment, some items entirely legal for civilian ownership, others in gray areas she'd navigated during her transition to civilian life. Her hands moved automatically, examining each piece with practiced efficiency. The familiar weight of the components grounded her, connecting her to the person she'd been, the elite soldier who had protected her unit through countless operations. Not this life, she whispered, closing the case without removing anything. Not yet. But she didn't lock the cabinet. That evening, Ella couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old farmhouse, every rustle of wind through the corn, set her nerves on edge. At midnight, she gave up pretending and began a perimeter check, an old routine from deployments. Her phone buzzed just as she completed the circuit. A text from Conrad. Records show Ridge applying for zoning change. Industrial use. Source says environmental shortcuts. Be careful. Coming by tomorrow. Ella's mind raced. Industrial zoning in the middle of agricultural land? Environmental shortcuts? The pieces were starting to fit together. She didn't make it to Conrad's promised visit. At 6:43 the next morning, her phone rang. The school principal's voice was tense. Ms. Blackwood, there's been an incident with Phoenix at her cousin's house. Ella's heart stopped. Is she hurt? No, physically she's fine. But there was a break-in at your cousin's house last night. Nothing was taken, but Phoenix's room was searched thoroughly. The police are there now. Cold fury washed over Ella. They had gone after her child. I'm on my way. Tell Phoenix I'll be there in 40 minutes. She was hanging up when a text message came through from an unknown number. Reconsider our offer. Next time won't be just a scare. The drive to Eastbrook took 35 minutes at speeds that would have earned her multiple tickets. Phoenix ran to her the moment she arrived, burying her face in Ella's chest. They were looking for me, weren't they? The girl whispered, too perceptive for her 12 years. Ella held her daughter tightly. I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever. After speaking with the local police, who seemed far more concerned than Sheriff Barton had been, Ella made a decision. She called her brother in Atlanta. I need you to take Phoenix for a while, she said without preamble. Ella? What's happening? Nothing I can't handle. But I need to know she's safe while I do. There was a pause. You're not back in that headspace, are you? The doctors said. This isn't PTSD. Ella cut him off. This is a real threat, and I need my daughter protected while I deal with it. Her brother sighed. Bring her down. She can stay as long as needed. That evening, after putting Phoenix on a bus to Atlanta with a tearful goodbye, Ella returned to an empty farmhouse. The silence was deafening. On the kitchen table lay the business card Byron Mercer had given her, taunting her with its embossed lettering and false professionalism. She picked up her phone and dialed the number. Ridge Capital, this is Byron Mercer. It's Ella Blackwood. Her voice was ice. You went after my daughter. A pause. I don't know what you're talking about, Sergeant. But I'm pleased you've called. Ready to discuss our offer. I want to meet. Tonight. My property. Eager to close the deal? I'm afraid my schedule is quite full. 9 o'clock, she interrupted. Come alone if you want a reasonable conversation. That's not how we conduct business. 9 o'clock, she repeated. Or the next call I make is to the State Environmental Agency about your zoning applications. The silence that followed told her she'd hit a nerve. 9 o'clock, he finally agreed. But I'll bring my associate. Standard practice. Fine. She hung up without another word. The call to Conrad was brief. It's happening tonight. 9 o'clock. Need backup. Ella thought of the rifle case in her closet. No, but be ready if I call. Always am, soldier. Watch your six. Can you believe what Ella is going through right now? Sometimes the battles we face aren't on foreign soil, but right in our own backyards. What would you do if someone threatened your family and home like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're inspired by Ella's strength and determination, hit that subscribe button right now to witness how this incredible mother fights back against those who underestimated her. Let's continue. As twilight settled over Riverbrook Farm, Ella Blackwood underwent a transformation. The civilian clothes came off. The worn jeans and flannel shirt were replaced by tactical pants and a fitted black long-sleeve shirt. Her movements became more precise, more measured, the farmer receding as the soldier emerged. She opened the biometric case and assembled the Remington with practiced efficiency. Each component clicked into place, familiar as breathing. The weight of it in her hands awakened muscle memories from 1,000 training sessions, 100 missions. This was not the life she had chosen when she returned to Riverbrook, but it was the life being forced upon her now. For the next 2 hours, Ella prepared the farmhouse according to tactical principles. Sightlines were established and blocked. Entry points secured or deliberately left vulnerable according to her strategy. The surrounding property divided into zones of visibility and concealment. At 8:15, she went to Phoenix's room. From her daughter's dresser, she took a framed photograph. Ella and Phoenix at the state fair last summer, cotton candy and unguarded smiles. She tucked it into her pocket, a reminder of what she was protecting. At 8:30, she received a text from Conrad. County records confirm Ridge Capital using Shell Company for industrial waste processing facility. Environmental restrictions bypassed through payoffs. For other sites showing groundwater contamination. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about buying farmland cheap. It was about acquiring property for illegal waste disposal where no one would look too closely. Rural areas with minimal oversight. And her farm was the missing piece in their geographical puzzle. These weren't just aggressive businessmen. They were criminals destroying land and threatening families for profit. At 8:45, Ella positioned herself in the barn with clear sight lines to the long driveway. The Remington was secured nearby, but out of sight. She wouldn't initiate with lethal force, but she would be prepared if they did. At precisely 9:02, headlights appeared on the drive. Not one vehicle, but 3. So much for Mercer coming with just an associate. Ella watched through night vision binoculars as 2 SUVs and a pickup truck approached the house. 8 men exited the vehicles, only one in business attire. Byron Mercer. The others wore jeans and jackets, with the unmistakable bulges of concealed weapons. One carried what appeared to be a gas can. Ella's blood ran cold. They hadn't come to negotiate. They'd come to eliminate the problem. She flipped the safety off her sidearm and activated the remote speakers she'd positioned around the property, another technique from her military days. The ability to project voice from multiple directions simultaneously could disorient opponents, make one person seem like many. This is private property. Her voice echoed from 3 different directions. I see 8 armed intruders with what appears to be incendiary materials. The men froze, heads swiveling to locate the source of the voice. What the hell? One of them muttered. Mercer stepped forward, attempting to maintain control. Sergeant Blackwood, this show of hostility is unnecessary. We're here as you requested, to discuss business. Business doesn't require 7 armed men and accelerants. Ella's voice responded from yet another location. You have 30 seconds to return to your vehicles and leave. Or what? Challenged one of the men, hand moving toward his waistband. There's 8 of us and 1 of you, lady. 20 seconds. Ella counted down calmly. Mercer gestured for the man to stand down. Sergeant, let's be reasonable. We have a very generous offer. 10 seconds. And it would be a shame if accidents were to happen because of a misunderstanding. Time's up. A single shot cracked through the night. The gas can exploded in a shower of sparks as the bullet struck it, forcing the man holding it to drop it with a shout of surprise. The flammable liquid ignited briefly before burning out on the gravel drive. A warning, not a serious fire. The men scattered for cover, drawing weapons. Jesus Christ, Mercer shouted, ducking behind an SUV. Blackwood, this is insanity. Another shot rang out, punching through the side mirror inches from Mercer's head. Next one won't miss. Ella's voice stated flatly from the darkness. I've recorded everything since you arrived. The threats, the weapons, the attempted arson. Silence fell across the property, broken only by the nervous breathing of men who had suddenly realized they were outmatched despite their numbers. You've been buying farms to create illegal waste disposal sites, Ella continued. Contaminating groundwater, threatening families, breaking into homes, endangering children. You don't know what you're talking about, Mercer called back, but his voice lacked conviction. The State Environmental Agency, FBI, and 3 news outlets will receive my evidence tomorrow. Unless you leave now and abandon your operations in this county. One of the men, braver or more foolish than the others, spotted movement in the barn and fired 3 wild shots in that direction. The answering shot was precisely targeted, striking him in the shoulder, incapacitating but not lethal. He fell with a scream of pain. 7 left. Ella's voice announced calmly. Who's next? Hold your fire. Mercer shouted to his men. Everyone hold fire. For 30 seconds, no one moved. Then Ella's voice came again, this time from directly behind Mercer. He spun around to find her standing there, sidearm aimed at his chest, having moved silently through the darkness using routes only she knew. Jesus, he gasped, stumbling backward. You threatened my child, Ella said, her voice deadly quiet. That was your mistake. Look, this got out of hand. You have one chance. Leave this county. Abandon your operation. If I see you or your men within 50 miles of here again, what happens next won't be a warning shot. Understood. The naked fear in Mercer's eyes answered before his words could. Understood. Get your wounded and go. You have 2 minutes. Under her watchful eye, the men retreated, loading their injured companion into one of the SUVs. As the vehicles turned around in the farmyard, Mercer rolled down his window. This isn't over, he called, a desperate attempt to save face. Ella raised the Remington, now in plain sight. For your sake, it should be. She watched until the taillights disappeared down the long drive, then methodically began collecting the shell casings and other evidence of the confrontation. The night had only just begun. Because despite her show of force, Ella knew the truth. Men like Mercer didn't give up so easily when millions were at stake. This wasn't the end of the threat. It was just the beginning of the war. Ella worked through the night, fueled by adrenaline and purpose. She contacted Conrad briefly to update him, then focused on securing the property for what she knew was coming. Mercer and his men would return, wounded pride and threatened profits all but guaranteed it. By dawn, she had transformed Riverbrook Farm into a defensive position that would have impressed her Special Forces instructors. Trail cameras positioned at strategic points. Trigger alarms on access roads. Fields of fire established with multiple fallback positions. The tactics were familiar, only the terrain had changed. At 6:30 a.m., her phone rang. Sergeant Blackwood. The voice belonged to Thomas Reed, her former commanding officer. Conrad called me. Said you've got a situation. Sir, Ella acknowledged, the military formality returning instantly. Hostile forces threatening my property and family. Criminal organization with local influence. Conrad filled me in, gave me the outline. A pause. You need reinforcements? Ella considered the offer. Part of her wanted to say yes, to have her unit at her back again. the camaraderie and shared expertise that had kept them all alive in the world's most dangerous places. No, sir, she decided. But I could use some intelligence support. Already on it. Sending you satellite imagery from a buddy at NGA. Your Ridge Capital friends have a pattern. 3 previous operations in other states. Same MO by land. Build illegal processing facilities, contaminate, then disappear when authorities catch on. Criminal charges? Shell companies take the fall. Principals like your Mercer walk away clean. Paper trails too muddy. Until now, Ella said grimly. Until now, Reed agreed. Listen, Blackwood, we've got your evidence heading to the right agencies. But bureaucracy moves slow. If these guys come back before the cavalry arrives. I know, sir. Rules of engagement? Ella gazed out across her family's land, thinking of Phoenix's face when she sent her away, of the fear in her daughter's eyes. Non-lethal where possible, she said finally. But I will protect what's mine. Understood. Satellite feed incoming. And Blackwood. Sir, give him hell. The morning passed in tense preparation. Ella studied the satellite imagery Reed sent, identifying possible approach vectors and vulnerabilities. She maintained radio contact with Conrad, who had positioned himself at a distance to monitor road traffic heading toward the farm. At 1:22 p.m., Conrad's voice crackled over the radio. 3 vehicles heading your way. Same models as last night, plus a black Escalade. ETA 10 minutes. Copy that, Ella replied, already moving to her primary position. Fall back to safe distance. Maintain comms. Wilco, be careful, soldier. Ella had chosen the silo as her command post. Excellent visibility, multiple exit options, hardened structure. Through her scope, she watched the convoy approach, slower this time. More cautious after last night's demonstration. They stopped at the gate, half a mile from the house. 4 men emerged, appearing to scout ahead on foot. Tactical approach. More disciplined than she'd anticipated. New players, Ella realized. Not Mercer's usual thugs. These moved with a coordination that suggested military or law enforcement background. Things had escalated. Through her earpiece came Conrad's voice again. Blackwood, Sheriff's Department, just roared past my position. 3 cruisers, lights on. Sheriff Barton. Finally interested now that gunplay was involved. But whose side would he take? Ella adjusted her strategy. More variables, more potential civilians in the crossfire. The ROEs had changed. The 4 advanced men had reached the first field, moving in a standard cover formation. Ella switched to her radio. You're on private property approaching a defended position, she broadcast on an open channel. You have crossed a line threshold. Next step triggers countermeasures. The men hesitated, looking at each other. One raised a handheld radio. We're here for a business meeting with the property owner, a voice replied. Measured. Professional. Under authorization from Sheriff Barton to resolve last night's incident. The sheriff has no jurisdiction over private property negotiations, Ella countered. And armed men don't come to business meetings. We're licensed security professionals ensuring the safety of our client after being fired upon last night. Your client brought incendiary materials to burn down my home, Ella stated flatly. Step back to your vehicles or face consequences. The man with the radio gestured to his companions, who spread out rather than retreating. They had made their choice. Ella activated the first countermeasure. A series of flashbangs erupted from hidden positions, temporarily disorienting the advance team. Not harmful, but effective. The men dropped to defensive postures, hands covering ears. Final warning, Ella broadcast. Through her scope, she watched as the men recovered, anger replacing professional detachment. One drew his weapon, a sleek, customized handgun. Private military contractor equipment, not standard security. She adjusted her aim and fired. The man's weapon shattered in his hand, the precision shot destroying the firearm without touching flesh. He fell back with a cry of shock. The others ducked for cover, now fully aware of what they were facing. One began a strategic retreat, the smarter choice. At the gate, vehicle doors opened. Men poured out, taking defensive positions. In their midst stood Byron Mercer and a new figure, taller, leaner, with the unmistakable bearing of someone in command. Ella's radio crackled again. Incoming. Sheriff's Department, 3 minutes out. The timing couldn't be worse. Law enforcement arriving in the middle of an armed standoff rarely improved the situation. Through her scope, Ella watched the new player directing Mercer's men with hand signals. Definitely military background. A professional. The stakes had just risen considerably. Time for a new approach. Ella abandoned her position, moving silently through predetermined routes to the rear of the property. The sheriff would arrive at the front gate, engaging with Mercer's standoff. Meanwhile, she would circle around and take control of the situation from an unexpected direction. The sound of sirens grew louder as she moved through the cornfield, staying low and invisible. Years of stealth infiltration served her well now. The corn provided perfect concealment, familiar terrain she'd grown up navigating. The sheriff's cruisers arrived with a spray of gravel, lights flashing. Through gaps in the corn, Ella watched Sheriff Barton emerge, hand on his sidearm. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice boomed across the property. Mercer stepped forward, the picture of an aggrieved businessman. "Sheriff, thank God you've arrived. The property owner has gone completely unstable. She fired upon my security team last night, and again just now when we came to resolve the situation peacefully." "Where is she?" Barton demanded, surveying the scene. "Barricaded inside, we believe. Armed and extremely dangerous." Ella continued her circular approach, moving closer to the main group of vehicles. The new commander stayed back, observing rather than engaging with the sheriff. Smart. Letting Mercer handle the local authority while he controlled the tactical elements. She needed to neutralize him first. Using the distraction of the sheriff's arrival, Ella slipped between two SUVs at the rear of the convoy. She located the Escalade, command vehicle, based on the satellite antenna. Through the tinted windows, she could make out communications equipment. This operation was more sophisticated than she'd initially assumed. The standoff at the front continued, Sheriff Barton now caught between protocol and his relationship with Mercer. His deputies fanned out uncertainly, outmatched by the private security team in both numbers and equipment. "I need to speak with Sergeant Blackwood," Barton insisted. "This is escalating beyond reason." "By all means," Mercer agreed smoothly. "If you can get her to come out peacefully." Ella made her decision. With swift, silent movements, she approached the command vehicle from the blind spot. The commander had stepped away momentarily to observe the sheriff's intervention, leaving his communications specialist alone inside. In one fluid motion, Ella opened the door, disabled the startled operative with a precision strike to the brachial plexus, and took control of the communications hub. From here, she could monitor all their channels, including the earpieces worn by security personnel. She located the commander's frequency and activated the microphone. "Attention security team leader," she spoke calmly into the system. "I've taken control of your command vehicle and communications. Your operator is incapacitated. Your team is surrounded by remote weapons systems controlled from this position." Through the windshield, she watched the commander freeze, hand moving instinctively to his earpiece. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Master Sergeant Ella Blackwood, 3rd Special Forces Group, retired. You're trespassing on my property in support of an illegal waste disposal operation. Stand down your team immediately." A long pause. "Master Sergeant?" Recognition colored his voice. "Sierra 6-4? The call sign hit Ella like a physical blow. Few people knew it. Even fewer had reason to recall it. "Identify yourself," she ordered. "Major James Hargrove. We ran parallel ops in Helmand. 2017. The name clicked into place. Task Force Sentinel. A joint operation that had saved dozens of lives. "What the hell are you doing working for criminals, Major?" Another pause. "Private security pays well." Didn't know the full picture. Mercer said this was a land dispute with an unstable veteran. "Then you've been played. Ridge Capital is running illegal waste disposal operations. Contaminating groundwater. Threatening families. Breaking into homes where children live." Through the window, she could see Hargrove processing this information, his posture stiffening. "Stand down your team, Major," Ella pressed, "or I release everything I have to federal authorities, including your involvement." Hargrove's hand rose to his ear again. All units, stand down. Weapons safe. Fall back to vehicles. Confusion rippled through the security team. Mercer spun toward Hargrove, face contorted with rage. "What are you doing?" he shouted. Ella exited the command vehicle, her sidearm held ready, but not aimed as she approached the confrontation. Sheriff Barton's hand went to his weapon as he spotted her. "Sergeant Blackwood." "Stand down immediately." "Sheriff," she acknowledged without taking her eyes off Mercer and Hargrove. "I have evidence of Ridge Capital's illegal waste disposal operations across 3 states. Environmental crimes, intimidation, breaking and entering, attempted arson of my property last night." Barton's expression shifted between uncertainty and alarm. "That's a serious accusation." "Major Hargrove," Ella cut in. "Tell the sheriff what kind of security operation brings incendiary materials to a property negotiation." All eyes turned to the security commander. Hargrove's professional demeanor had hardened into something colder as he looked at Mercer. "My team was told this was a standard security detail for a business negotiation," he stated. "We were not informed about last night's events or any illegal activities." "He's lying," Mercer shouted. "This woman is delusional. She's threatening innocent businessmen with military-grade weapons. She's calling us out for good reason." Conrad's voice rang out as the Vietnam veteran limped into view from the access road. In his hands, he carried a thick folder. "Sheriff, this contains county records showing Ridge Capital's shell companies, environmental violations, and property acquisition patterns. Same pattern in 3 other states where they left contaminated land behind." Sheriff Barton looked from Conrad to Ella to Mercer, the comfortable certainties of his world crumbling visibly. "Mercer authorized his men to threaten my daughter," Ella added quietly. "A 12-year-old girl." That detail seemed to penetrate. Something hardened in Barton's expression. "Mr. Mercer, I think you and I need to have a conversation at the station." "This is absurd," Mercer sputtered. "You know me, Clay. My family has been in this county for generations. You're taking the word of." "Choose your next words very carefully." Barton cut him off, hand still on his sidearm. Mercer's face twisted with barely contained rage. His gaze snapped to Ella, hatred burning in his eyes. "You think this is over? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I have connections you can't imagine." "So do I," Ella replied calmly. As if on cue, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. 2 black choppers appeared over the tree line, bearing the unmistakable markings of federal law enforcement. Major Hargrove stepped away from Mercer, aligning himself with the law enforcement side of the confrontation. "For the record, my company is terminating our contract with Ridge Capital, effective immediately." The helicopters circled lower, preparing to land in the open field. Mercer's remaining men looked to each other nervously, then began laying down weapons. Ella approached Sheriff Barton. "Federal Environmental Crimes Task Force," she explained. "My former commanding officer made some calls. Ridge Capital's operations span multiple states. That makes it federal jurisdiction." Barton nodded slowly, professional enough to recognize when a situation had moved beyond his authority. "I underestimated you, Sergeant, and I missed what was happening in my own county." They were careful and well-connected. Still, he looked around at the farm, seeing it with new eyes. "I should have listened." As federal agents disembarked from the helicopters, Ella felt the accumulated tension of weeks beginning to release. The threat wasn't completely neutralized. Men like Mercer often had contingency plans and resources beyond the obvious. But the immediate danger had passed. Justice, or at least the beginning of it, had arrived at Riverbrook Farm. This is what happens when someone underestimates a mother protecting what's hers. Ella knew exactly what she was doing every step of the way. Have you ever seen justice serve this powerfully? This is why we need to hear these stories of strength, wisdom, and standing up against those who abuse their power. If you're feeling this energy right now, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our powerful stories of triumph. Now let's see how Ella's journey concludes. 3 weeks later, Ella stood in her kitchen, watching through the window as Phoenix chased fireflies in the twilight. The farm was peaceful again, perhaps more truly peaceful than it had been since her return from the military. The federal investigation into Ridge Capital was proceeding with methodical efficiency. Byron Mercer and 3 of his partners had been arrested on multiple charges ranging from environmental crimes to conspiracy and racketeering. Their initial court appearance had made national headlines, particularly after evidence emerged of similar operations in other rural communities, many targeting farms owned by minorities or financially vulnerable families. Ella's phone chimed with a text message from Conrad. Channel 5 news van just turned onto your road. Ready for your close-up? She smiled, typing back, send them up. Phoenix picked out my outfit. The media had descended within days of the standoff. At first, Ella had declined all interviews, focusing instead on reuniting with Phoenix and restoring normalcy to their lives. But as the full scope of Ridge Capital's operations became public, she had reconsidered. Some stories needed to be told, not for personal glory, but to protect others who might face similar predatory tactics. Sheriff Barton had been among the first officials to visit after the dust settled. His apology had been awkward but sincere. I made assumptions, he'd admitted. Saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually happening. We all have blind spots, Ella had replied, accepting the olive branch. In small communities, burning bridges rarely served anyone's interests. The kitchen door opened as Phoenix bounded in, jar of fireflies illuminating her delighted face. Mom, I caught 7. That's a new record. Ella pulled her daughter into a one-armed hug. Impressive hunting skills. You get that from your mother. Phoenix rolled her eyes, but leaned into the embrace. Is the news lady coming today? Any minute now. Remember what we discussed. No details about the scary parts. Focus on how the community came together afterward. And always mention that the real heroes are the people who stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Ella smiled, heart swelling with pride. That's my girl. The sound of tires on gravel announced the news van's arrival. Through the window, Ella watched the reporter emerge, a poised woman in a tailored blazer, cameraman in tow. Ready? She asked Phoenix. Her daughter nodded solemnly. Ready. They stepped onto the porch together as the news crew approached. Strength in unity. Another lesson from Ella's military days that applied equally to parenthood. The reporter introduced herself, then prepared for the interview. As the camera light blinked on, Ella felt Phoenix's hand slip into hers. Sergeant Blackwood, your story has captured national attention. A single mother and veteran who protected her farm from corporate criminals. What do you want people to take away from what happened here? Ella considered the question carefully. I want people to understand that justice isn't always delivered automatically. Sometimes you have to stand up and demand it, but you don't have to do it alone. She squeezed Phoenix's hand. Community matters. Truth matters. And underestimating someone because of how they look or where they live. That's a mistake that can cost you everything. Your military background obviously played a crucial role in how you handled the situation. Do you see parallels between your service overseas and what you faced here? The mission is always the same, Ella replied. Protect what matters. In the military, I protected my country and my unit. Here, I'm protecting my daughter and our home. The tactics might change, but the core purpose doesn't. And what would you say to other small farmers or property owners who might be facing similar pressure tactics? Document everything. Trust your instincts. Build alliances. And remember that predators count on isolation and fear to succeed. Breaking that isolation is the first step toward justice. The interview continued for 20 minutes, Phoenix occasionally adding her perspective with a poise beyond her years. When the camera finally switched off, the reporter thanked them both. This segment will air tomorrow evening, she explained. Your story is going to help a lot of people, Sergeant Blackwood. After the news van departed, Ella and Phoenix returned to the kitchen where dinner was waiting. As they settled at the table, Phoenix looked thoughtfully at her mother. Mom, are we safe now? Really safe. Ella met her daughter's gaze directly. Ridge Capital has been exposed. Their operation is dismantled. The immediate threat is gone. But, perceptive child, but the world isn't perfectly safe, Phoenix. It never has been. Then how do we live with that? The question, so innocent yet so profound, caught Ella by surprise. She reached across the table, taking her daughter's smaller hands in hers. We prepare without becoming paranoid. We trust without becoming naive. We build community instead of walls. And we remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. Phoenix nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom. Like you did. Like we both did, Ella corrected gently. Bravery takes many forms. Later that evening, after Phoenix had gone to bed, Ella stepped onto the porch with a cup of tea. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast rural sky like diamond dust. In the distance, the lights of Conrad's farmhouse winked reassuringly. Her phone buzzed with a message from her former commanding officer. "Congratulations on the win, Sergeant. Proud of you. If you ever want to consult on rural security measures, there's a position waiting." Ella smiled, considering the offer. Perhaps there was a way to continue serving, to use her skills to protect others without returning to war zones, to transform the violence of her past into protection for the future. The corn rustled in the evening breeze, the sound like whispered conversations across the fields her grandfather had purchased with hard-won dollars and harder-won dignity. Land that had supported her family for generations. Land that would now support her daughter and, someday, perhaps her daughter's children. Riverbrook Farm had been tested and had emerged stronger, just like its owner. Ella Blackwood took a deep breath of clean country air, grateful for the peace, but ready. Always ready, should that peace be threatened again. Some battles were worth fighting. Family, legacy, home, the things that define not just what you would die for, but more importantly, what you would live for. And that was a mission she would never abandon. This story reminds us that strength comes in many forms, and true heroes walk among us every day. Ella Blackwood shows us that when we stand firm in our truth and fight for what's right, justice can prevail against any odds. If this story moved you the way it moved me, please hit that subscribe button right now and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Our community grows stronger with every voice, with every story of triumph over injustice. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated only to prove everyone wrong? Or maybe you've been that person yourself. Drop your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next story of courage, justice, and the power of the human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe.